Okay, so we just wait for the link so we can start.
Mag-switch pa ba tayo, Mr. Chair? O ito na yung atin?
Ito na.
Okay, sige. I'll go on cam pag nasa bahay na ako.
All right. Okay, ingat ka sa pagdadrive, ha?
Thank you. Okay lang, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, ito na yung atin.
So the Facebook link. Share. Okay. So good afternoon, everyone. And welcome again sa ating Friday session. No? So marami nang naghihintay sa atin. No? So si Jules, no? Magandang hapon sa iyo, paring Jules. Si VP Sheila, nandito na si VP Sheila kasama natin. And today's session, again, no, hindi pa tayo tapos sa ating mga women leaders in the space of cybersecurity in the Philippines. So for this afternoon, mamaya na natin sila i-introduce. Pina-trailing tayo, no? But equally important event that we're gonna do today before we start our Kwentuhang cybersecurity is the oath-taking of the officers and members of Laguna, PixPro Laguna, and Davao City chapters. Medyo matagal-tagal na to, no? Karoon na tayo ng briefing, and I would like to mention again the chapter president of Laguna chapter is also another fine young woman, no? Who is also taking the lead. Not only in cybersecurity actually, but in many many facets, no, in her career. So without further delay, let me just read the names, no, for our Laguna PixPro Laguna chapter. Miss Janet Chavez Arceo as the president, Miss Jan. And Mr. Cisenio Sereno, Mr. Jojo, as the Vice President. The Jonathan Maliwat is the Chapter Secretary. Nathaniel Paul Fantastico is the Treasurer. And Fritz Perez is the Auditor. And we have 4 members who's going to take oath with the officers today. Mr. Paul Fantastico, Alvin Manangan, Melvin Ladra, and Jezreel Santos. So, good afternoon sa inyong lahat. No? And then, our PixPro Davao chapter, there are 15 of them, led by the president, Engineer Warren Badong. Hi, may hapon. And Mr. Brian Gerald Belga, the vice president for admin and finance. Eduardo Barrete, Vice President for Training and Events, and Mr. Chrismar Baste, mga kaibigan natin from Davao City, the Vice President for Membership. And the members, afternoon. And the members, Mr. Jake Pointer Conte, Mr. Honelito Ray Gilos, Nilmar Obus, Ian Jake Hornido, Harley Aguilar, Zar Ian Abellana, Jing Jesao Havilles, Jose Ronnie Tabudlong II, Cristel Oliveros, John Mark Papin, and Kier Chi Baranda. Cristel is a lady? Ha? Ba si Cristel?
Yes po, yes sir.
That's good, that's good. Nasabi natin, no? We need to, your challenge actually is to recruit more women in your organization.
Yes sir.
We want to encourage more women to take the journey of cybersecurity. Okay, so for today's event, we're gonna do the oath taking for the officers and members. Can you please share the oath, May or Alvin? The oath, please. All right, so we don't have to stand up. If you can raise your right hand. I,
Warren Dadong.
Alvin Ladra.
I, Wismar Baspe.
do solemnly swear
Solemnly swear
that I will bear my absolute faith and allegiance to the Republic of the Philippines
that I will bear my
absolute
allegiance to the Republic of the Philippines
and support and defend its constitution and laws against all enemies, foreign and domestic.
support and defend its constitution and laws against all enemies, foreign and domestic.
That through the best of my ability,
Through the best of my ability,
build confidence and security in the information society
build confidence and security in the information society
by working closely with its stakeholders
by working closely with its stakeholders
and by responding to the growing cybersecurity challenges of our nation in a coordinated manner.
and by responding to the growing cybersecurity challenges of our nation in a coordinated manner.
That I will support the advocacies of the government and this organization
And I will support the advocacy of the government and this organization
in establishing the framework for the development and refinement of our nation's cybersecurity.
in establishing the framework of the development and refinement of our nation's cybersecurity.
That I will cooperate in the implementation of cybersecurity operational efforts
That I will cooperate in the implementation of cybersecurity operational efforts
be it for the public or private sector.
be it for the public and private sector.
That I will not harm, damage, or disrupt the information security structure of the government and local businesses.
I will not damage or disrupt the information structure of the government and local businesses.
Instead, I will, to the best of my ability, strengthen and promote its growth.
To the best of my abilities and promote its growth.
That I will not withhold any information that will help and support the advancement of these organizations, its officers, and its members.
I will not withhold any information that will help and support the advancement of this organization, its officers, and members.
That I will help and assist to the best of my knowledge and ability to protect the cyber sovereignty of this country.
That I will
help my knowledge and ability to protect the cyber sovereignty of this country.
And its entire netizenry from all types of cyber threat, foreign or domestic.
and its entire netizenry from all types of cyber threats, foreign and domestic.
that I take this obligation freely without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion,
that I take this
I will take
obligation
this
freely
obligation
without
freely without any mental reservation
purpose
or
of
purpose of
evasion,
evasion,
and that I will well and faithfully fulfill the duties and responsibilities of this organization
and
that I
I
will
will
well and
faithfully
faithfully fulfill
fulfill the
the
duties
duties
and
and
responsibilities of
responsibilities of
this
this
organization.
organization.
So help me God.
So
So
help
help me God.
Congratulations, everyone. Welcome. Welcome to
Congratulations.
the family. Congratulations. All right. So it's 5:13, and welcome again to the PIX Pro Laguna and PIX Pro Davao City chapters. You have been briefed already. Your the expectations and what we need to do. If we always go back to our oath, no, it's always on the nation building side of cybersecurity. All right. So now we now go to our introduction of our guest for this afternoon. So let me start with by introducing our presenter for this afternoon, and later I will introduce also the someone who can provide more information about this partnership that we are talking about. So the guest for this afternoon is Lieutenant Colonel Francel Margaret Padilla Taborlupa. She is from the Philippine Army and the head executive assistant of the Presidential Advisor on Peace, Reconciliation, and Unity / Vaccine Czar, General Galvez. Am I correct? He is still the head, right? And recently, a judge as one of the top 30 women in security in ASEAN 2021, and one of the top 10 women in cybersecurity Philippines 2020. Mabigat ito. Our speaker's career has taken her through 25 years of study, research, teaching, and administration. And she holds 3 advanced degrees in Masters in Information Systems at the University of the Philippines, Masters in Public Management, Major in Development and Security at the Development Academy of the Philippines, where she garnered the gold medal as top graduate and another gold medal for Best Action Plan and Project. And most recently, Masters in International Development Practice at Monash University, Australia. So, hindi ito so yung guest natin ngayon, no? And she is also the recipient of the of Colonel Alan Dexter Award as an honor graduate of the CEIS Officers Advanced Course in Fort Gordon, Georgia, USA. There's more of this lady. I'm sure you can if you go to Google and search her name, you will find a lot more about Lieutenant Colonel Francel. No? And our welcome, Francel. Welcome to our Friday session.
Good afternoon, sir. Good afternoon po sa lahat. Thank you, sir, for that very kind introduction. Medyo parang na-pressure ako bigla, sir, na ang lecture.
Mabigat. Okay. So our next guest, no? She is currently the Vice President, IT Security and IT Infrastructure Head of Aboitiz Group of Companies. This is a big group of company, and being the head of IT Security and IT Infra is not an easy job. No? Kaya nga they hired a woman to do a better job. So Charmaine she has more than 30 years of experience in the U.S. military and the private sector, experience in building cyber risk, no? And IT security programs with highly effective teams focused on reducing the risk of security breaches, minimizing disruptions to preserve brand reputation and build client confidence. This is a good combination, no? Let us welcome our second guest, Ms. Charmaine Valmonte. Charmaine, welcome. Welcome to the show. So we welcome our two guests. Another power two. Yeah? Hindi pa tayo tapos, as I mentioned earlier. Hindi pa tayo tapos sa ating women in cybersecurity. So today's session, Lieutenant Colonel Francel will give a short presentation about the importance of partnership in cybersecurity. After that, na tayo, gera na tayo sa discussion. No. Okay? Lieutenant Colonel Francel, you have the floor. You may share your screen.
Thank you, sir. All right, so can you see my screen now?
Yes.
Yes. Sirs and ma'ams, at this point, I hope I'll start the ball rolling by sparking a conversation about the importance of public-private partnership, or most commonly called as the PPP. So foremost, we define it. PPP means an enterprise in which a project or service is financed or operated through a partnership of government and private enterprises. So it is usually a long-term partnership between the public and the private sector. So PPP offers monetary or non-monetary advantages. So both for the public sector and the private, because it addresses the limited funding resources of the government in terms of local infrastructure, or it could be development projects for the public sector, thereby allowing the allocation of public funds for other local priorities. So here, we try to explore PPPs as a way of introducing private sector technology as well as the innovation in providing better public services through improved operational efficiency. So with this, we incentivize the private sector to deliver projects on time and within the budget. So in a partnership within the public sector and the private sector, it is for the purpose of delivering a project or a service which is traditionally provided by the public sector. So to transfer natin siya sa private. So PPP can increase the quality, the efficiency, and the effectiveness and competitiveness of public services. It transcends different sectors. So pwede siyang in the energy, telecommunications, infocoms technology, transportation, as well as water and sanitation. Pwede din siya sa tourism services, infrastructure services, and the like. So marami siyang pwedeng paggamitan. So we ask, in PPP, who are involved? So there are three actors to it. We have the government, the private sector, and we also have the financial institutions for the payment. So let's talk about the advantages. So for the advantages, we have early completion bonus. So to improve the efficiency, the private companies are motivated through a bonus if they complete the project ahead of time. They also are able to cut down on taxes because it is cost efficient. The infrastructure projects would help the government to save funds, and thus it provides for a reduction in the tax rates for the private entities who are involved. We also have project completion efficiency. When the standard time for completing a project is estimated, its execution and fulfillment become more competent. So in terms of project feasibility, however, the project's risks, involvement, and practical implementation are very well analyzed. And so the chances of failure are actually drastically reduced. We also have superior quality standards. So PPP approaches and initiates the benchmarking for the desired quality of the project, and thereby it ensures that the same is true during the project's life cycle. And another advantage is the excellent infrastructure solutions. This has been made possible since the proficient private companies work in collaboration with the government, where each of them contributes their best. So with this, we have a better run on our investment. So yung ROI natin on the PPP infrastructure projects might be reasonably high in the long run. Bakit? The reason being is that it has been monitored and accomplished by both parties working together. There is also an advantage of transfer of risk for the government side. So the government hands over the associated risk along with the project to the private firms who have actually the relevant experience and knowledge in the area. And thereby it reduces budget deficits. In the PPP approach, yung private company, they determine the cost and they perform the capital budgeting to avoid any shortage of funds in the future. And finally, last but not least, it ensures efficient government investment. Since PPP initially lets the private companies invest their funds in the infrastructure projects, the government can then utilize its capital for other means such as socio-economic welfare. So when there are pros, of course, there are cons. So it does come with some disadvantages. So on the other hand, it involves risks for private firms. So sabi natin kanina, transfer ng government to the private yung risk. The public-private partnership provides for the transfer of risk to the private entities. Sometimes it overburdens them and results with the responsibility of ending up in failure. There's also varying profitability. So hindi natin malaman kung kikita or hindi. The complexity, competition level, and the associated risk, and the nature and size and the impact of the project actually determines the profitability of it. So it's also possible to raise government expenses. Due to the project's high-risk involvement, the companies usually demand high compensation, leading to a hike in government expenses. And maybe it can also be not cost efficient. So at times, the government lacks the sufficient knowledge of the project cost, yung actual cost niya. So when the private company holds the complete cost information, the public sector may actually be misled. So that's one disadvantage. And another disadvantage is dependency on the private sector. The most significant limitation of the PPP is that in this approach, the government majorly relies on the private sector for project undertaking and accomplishment. So putting it in the perspective of the Philippines in particular has embarked in several PPP programs. So in fact, for today, the best example, because it's actually where I am very much immersed now, so the best example that I can give is for us to discuss the PPP in the COVID-19 pandemic response. For the COVID-19 pandemic, it has a major economic shock that affected the PPPs and the infrastructure projects as a whole. So it affected it in all stages and in all sectors. The supply chains are disrupted, customer demands have failed, and health regulations force a change in the way the businesses are conducted now. So malaki talaga yung pinagbago because of COVID. So nonetheless, in the middle of the COVID-19 pandemic, the construction of PPP projects still continues. So with the advent of new and less stringent restrictions now, we are supporting the government's move to open the economy and bring in more jobs. So bumabalik na tayo sana sa, or we have to embrace the new normal now. So health protocols such as wearing of masks, social distancing will continue to be the new normal during this pandemic. But it should not deter us from moving on. So anong ginawa ng government? The government created a task force. It's called Test, Trace, and Treat. So it's called T3 to partner with the private sector in addressing the COVID response. So several entities came in the beginning of it. So for instance, we are very grateful with Smart PLDT for donating cell phones / radios for the use in selected government hospitals para madaling mag-usap, like yung emergency room can now use that smart radio and tell the ones on the upper level floors to prepare an ICU because there's the patient that's coming up. So with the use of these technological devices, napais natin yung burden at yung pagod ng healthcare workers natin. So also, We also were given Wi-Fi home broadband units by Smart PLDT for the use of the National Task Force Operating Center at the onset. Kasi nung sinet up namin yun, there was nothing there, no internet connectivity, and also we are very grateful that the private partners of us are nandyan, mabilis silang tawagan and easily reacted to attend to our needs, to help us set up. And Converge also provided fiber connectivity in the NTF Ops and in the later part. And so there was a collaboration between government and private entities since the very beginning. So in terms of health needs, supply chains for the pandemic response was facilitated by T3 to different information systems that were deployed for the use in the pandemic response. So the private sector, such as Ayala Corporation, also helped in setting up testing laboratories. They donated RT-PCR machines to different government entities, such as the University of Cebu Medical Center in the Visayas and Southern Philippines Medical Center in Davao. They also took part in the conversion of the World Trade Center into one of the country's mega COVID quarantine facilities. And with that, they donated swabbing booths to these mega swabbing facilities as well. So ANCAS was also one entity who was there from the beginning. They partnered with Philippine Red Cross, and they are the first and the largest app-based professional motorcycle taxi service in the country to assist in the delivery of humanitarian interventions such as blood needs, first aid kits, and other responses in relation to the fight against COVID-19. There is also McDonald's and Jollibee who helped us in our strategic communications and feeding our healthcare workers in the private and government hospitals. So with this, there's also a project by Smart PLDT who provided Wi-Fi connectivity to the quarantine facilities to give morale and to our patients who are under quarantine. So as a means for them to contact their families and be connected to the outside world somehow while being in quarantine. So all in all, pandemic or not, we should harness the opportunities and overcome the challenges together. Collaboration is inevitable when it comes to substantial projects requiring high investments and expertise. So to each his own, kanya-kanya tayo ng maiko-contribute. Therefore, the government prefers to take the assistance of professionals in the field, and here comes the role of private companies for the accomplishment of such projects. We can heal as one and recover as one Philippines. The pandemic response is a classic example of PPP, showing the bayanihan spirit of the Filipinos, all working to mitigate the effects of the pandemic with the whole of government approach. So that's my presentation for this afternoon, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Francel. You know, the reason why we ask you to present this public and private partnership, because we also believe that we need the same kind of partnership in combating the growing threats of our cyberspace. No? Before we go to that part, let me just introduce the the board of PixPro who is here already. Mr. Oka, Bisaya.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone.
Our VP Sheila. Is VP Sheila here?
Hello, good afternoon.
Hi, good afternoon, VP Sheila. And VP Alex is
Good
here
afternoon,
also.
magandang hapon po sa inyo lahat.
VP Mia. May we request the chapter presidents of the Laguna chapter and Davao City chapter to join us? Andyan pa ba sila?
We're still here, Mr. Chair.
Right, that's good. And Mr. Warren. Parang
Yes, sir. But I cannot start yung camp. I do not know if,
okay, no problem. No problem. Just be there. You can comment or you can ask questions. And of course, our national president, Mr. President Ace Asidilio is also with us.
Thanks, Mr.
So,
Chair. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon.
that was a very interesting topic, you know, because what we need in our current uh, situation right now. We'd like to get the idea of Charmaine about this partnership. If in any way you have been exposed to this kind of partnership, and if this is really what we need to combat these growing threats in our cyberspace. Charmaine?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Angel. And very true. We've been singing this, praising this song for the last, since 2011 when I first got here from, as I retired from the US military. Because we're finding that cyber, just like anything else, security, just like anything crime out there, it is the same. The difference is it's, digital, right? And it doesn't pick a demographic. It doesn't pick a person, a color, or whatnot. It's just attacks, right? Much like terrorists around the world. And so there is a real need to share threat intelligence, to share information. And it's not saying, oh, I know this happened to this company or that government, but really the context of what is going on. Because the more that people know and share, the better we are at protecting ourselves. It's being able to share those practices with one another and being able to say, hey, if something's going on in my neck of the woods, it must be important to the public sector, to the private sector. And most especially, we have a society that we're protecting, right? We all live and work on internet our whole life, our whole family, everybody today in our new normal. And so it's no longer just a private sector or a public sector, it's our whole life. Even our kids, especially our kids, right? The targets today. The bad guy will really pick up on the easy target. And we all are in the cyber profession. We know how to see these things. But if we don't share more of these things across the different the demographics that we have, those are the easy targets they'll get into. And so it's so really important, and it's really not an issue of who, but it's really when. When it happens, we have to be prepared. And just like the Colonel was talking about, the bayanihan aspect of, let's do bayanihan aspect of protecting ourselves, protecting one another. And it doesn't matter who we are or what demographic, or if we're in public or private. We're really just stronger together if we do it, right? And protect one another.
Very nicely, very well said, Charmaine. I'd like to ask the National President to add more clarity on this topic that we are talking about right now. Mr. President?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, thank you to Colonel Francel and Charmaine for joining us today. So as mentioned by our chairman a while ago, this is already the third week that we have been featuring women leaders in cybersecurity. The first one, Colonel Taburlupa, discussed the importance of public-private partnerships, not just in the pandemic response, but in the context of our discussion this afternoon, we will be talking also about how public-private partnerships can help actually secure cyberspace. And we're fortunate that not only can we introduce a Philippine perspective in that discussion, given the vast experience of Charmaine in the US Army, and given the fact that the United States itself, the most connected, the most advanced society in the globe today, has also been the most attacked. Maybe she could also give us some glimpse of that, dilemma, Charmaine, later on. So, Mr. Chair, maybe we could shift a bit our discussion on where we are right now in the Philippines in terms of public-private partnerships, in terms of securing Philippine cyberspace, or PPP for cybersecurity. I know for a fact that our enterprise has been very much involved with the AFP in terms of especially working with the Air Force. Why the Air Force? Well, the enterprise believed that among the services, okay, with all due respect to our two Lady Army colonels, okay, we believe that I think if there is to be a genesis of cybersecurity in the AFP, it has to come from the Air Force. So we worked on that theory, okay? So, but that's just one. That's just one enterprise. So that's just PLDT and SMART. We need others to jump in as well. PixPro is potentially one of those private entities that can help in this regard. By next year, 2022, our national cybersecurity strategy will be ending its shelf life. And many experts can actually pull in their expertise and help draft the next one for 2022 up to 2028. So these are just, the low-hanging fruits, we could call them. So maybe I could ask Francel to jump in first in this regard, and then we'll ask Charmaine later on to give us sort of the US perspective on PPP for cybersecurity, and even from a global perspective, if it's possible at all. So, Francel?
Good afternoon, or almost good evening na pala, sir. In my opinion, sir, based on my experience at my current designation, ang nakita ko, sir, is with the public-private partnership that's ongoing, because pandemic nga, sir, so yun yung napakaraming nag-emerge na partnerships, is that there's a there's like a disconnect to cybersecurity. Because, sir, everything is a hush. Diba, gusto natin mag-deploy tayo agad ng mga systems to aid in our pandemic response kasi mabilisan lang siya. And so we have to decide early and all that. But if there is no voice saying therein, we have to consider the cybersecurity aspect of all of this data that we're putting out there. Kasi, sir, nire-require natin lahat to register, mag-QR codes and all of that. QR codes are not that safe. Nandun din it holds a lot of data containing your person. Kung ano man yung ni-register mo doon, it's all there. So if one database is leaked, then millions of entries in that database get leaked. And there is no one actually speaking about cybersecurity in terms of all of this data that's being gathered in this pandemic. Lahat, sir, everywhere you go to Davao, there's Davao QR. You go to Mandaluyong, there's Mandaluyong QR. And all of them require you to put in those data whenever you register.
And
so,
Francel, these apps, apps have been developed by private sector entities, correct?
Yes.
All right.
And ang isa pa dun, sir, di ba, sir, if you sign up for a particular newsletter, for example, it is mandated that you have to have an option to opt out. Diba, sir, may i-click ka doon that you want to unsubscribe. But the thing with all of these QR codes, you go to Stay Safe, you go to all of these QR codes, there is no way for us to opt out. So if we put our addresses there, our age and everything, they can track us with our GPS turned on, there's no way for us to opt out of the service that we were mandated to join. So supposedly, sir, there should be an option to do so. So I think, sir, there's a lacking voice stating therein the importance of cybersecurity with all of this data, because data is the new oil, it's the new currency. So it could be sold somewhere, and then, for example, the data of all who has been tested positive, then you are all possible customers for a drug against COVID-19 or a vitamin that will, help you recover and stuff like that. So it's being sold to pharmaceutical companies and all that. And thus we receive all of these text messages, sir, offering different, so for all we know, sir, our data has already been compromised in one way or another.
So Colonel Francel makes a very good point. No? PPP, whether it's in pandemic response or in cybersecurity, is not a cure-all. It's actually a double-edged sword. So like what was clarified a while ago, these apps have been developed by private sector entities. And we don't know, no, really, up to what extent they are secure, whether the application itself or our databases, no, or containing our information rather. So thank you, Francel, for bringing that up. So we'd like Charmaine to jump in. Charmaine, what's the perspective from the US, no, and maybe from a global perspective as well? May we hear from you?
Yeah, and in the US, it's more like we're really looking into, as one of a gentleman from the NSA had said back in March, cybersecurity is a team sport. And that partnership is critical because there's not one full picture from one organization or the other. And you can see the amount of cyber commands that has been built. And Colonel Tabupuela, Colonel Francis, I'm sure you've been to the cyber school, Fort Gordon. I am from there, by the way, so I'm glad you got to see the place. But if you notice, everywhere in the world has built a cyber command, right? And it is joint. It is not Army, it is not Navy, it's joint. And then now they're starting to say, well, besides being joint in terms of the military, let's pull in the private sector, the guys that really do this for a living, the private sector. And also, of course, the CIA and all the letters out there. But if you notice, they've built these task forces, right? And now because of the supply chain issues, right? Because the bad guys are saying, I know you've built your networks. I know you've built your fortified your environments. Let me get into those that you really trust, which is your third parties, your supply chains. And what makes it so bad, it's supply chains, third and fourth party, right? SolarWinds is a perfect example for that. And there's plenty more. And this is one of the reasons why they came out with the executive order, right? In saying that not only are we wanting to make sure we have the regulations and that we actually do the assessments carefully on not only just the military side, but also the private side, because we are using these systems, commercial off the shelf. No one out there is not using commercial off the shelf. And so there has to be that connection between the two. And they talked about 3 channels: detecting, innovating, and mitigating, right? And if you have to do it together, both public and private.
So, Mr. President, going back to the what Colonel Francel mentioned earlier, this is a whole of nation approach. The same concept must be used to improve our cybersecurity posture as a country, right?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm glad you mentioned that because although we don't have, to be fair to Colonel Taburlupa, we can't actually ask her or put her on the spot about the cybersecurity posture of our country. It's interesting. Charmaine brought out the fact that the U.S. cybersecurity posture, aside from what is defined in their 2018 National Cybersecurity Strategy, currently is being defined by the recent EO or executive order put out by President Biden. And you also hear from a country like Singapore, who have shifted their strategy from defending their cyberspace to one that assumes breach. Okay, but maybe as a discussion group, without necessarily making aspersions of our government and its approach, I'm really at a loss in understanding what our current approach and what our current philosophy is in terms of defending our cyberspace, because we have the National Cybersecurity Strategy enumerated for 2017 to 2022, but we've been discussing, it's a back and forth within PIXPRO, Mr. Chair, if you remember. do we really see it rolling off the ground? Do we really see the cascade of that strategy? Do we really feel it, especially us, in the private industry being the stakeholders of that strategy? Do we really feel the impact of that strategy? So siguro we can discuss it along that line, and maybe Francel, the AFP, the military defense establishment is one big piece of that strategy, if you remember. What's the view from the AFP to the extent that you could enlighten us on that matter, please?
In the AFP, ito sir, perfect example din siya ng the AFP is really trying to implement din tong PPP. So the AFP has seen din kung hindi kasi siya pwedeng siya lang sir eh. The AFP has a mandate of securing the people and securing the state. But you know, because we have embraced cyber as the fourth domain of operations, so it traverses down that domain. No? Kailangan niyang gawin. But yun nga sir, I had a discussion with you and you told me na ang tingin kasi sa AFP is warlike. And ano eh, pag sinabi mong cyber, it's cyber war, cyber defense is just at the back of it, but it's more on cyber offense lagi. So it's just like an offensive term. So in AFP sir has been partnering with private organizations and then telling them also their observations. So I think sir, with the telcos and all that, they're trying to merge forces in order to secure cyberspace in whatever way they can. So I cannot divulge whatever systems that we have in place, but you know, the willingness to help is there, and the willingness to reach out and be able to partner with other entities in order to secure cyberspace in different aspects. Kasi nga, di ba, sorry, yung cyber, wala siyang exclusive economic zone. We cannot say na ito lang yung borders ko and ito lang yung borders ko. So the best approach to it is tapat ko, linis ko, parang ganun. So we secure our own backyards. So the AFP can only do it if you allow AFP also to partner with others. So I think with the collaboration that we have with the private entities, then it's a good way to start, sir. But with the creation of now the AFP Cyber Group, I think, sir, we're in the works of leveling up our cyber capabilities. So hopefully, sir, in the near future, we attain the goals that we need. But it's a lot of work. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Francel. Mr. Chair, before I ask you and our VPs and even John to jump in, I'd just like to make a quick circle back to what Charmaine said a while ago. She raised a good point about the dangers lying in the cybersecurity supply chain. And recently, we've seen that the biggest, I think, issue related to supply chain was the hack that happened last December 2020 through SolarWinds. No, for those of us who've been following that. Charmaine, we'd like to get your view as to you're working now with a very diversified conglomerate, and the same manner, our enterprise PLDT and Smart are facing the same supply chain risks. No, we have a very long supply chain, being a telco reliant on more than not just a dozen, but even more than a dozen suppliers. So 2 points. First, how does the conglomerate treat this problem in terms of either narrowing down maybe the list of suppliers or maybe going through another approach? And second, what's your view on the Clean Network project of the US government? Basically, for those who are not familiar with that program, it's the US wants to maybe limit the exposure of its private and even federal agencies to untrusted or untrustworthy entities. No, basically, there's an accusation that this is being targeted towards China, and it's basically shutting out the US market from the Chinese suppliers. May we hear from you on this particular point, 2 points, Charmaine?
So one of the first things is third-party risk. And I think it's, I mean, from our perspective and as a professional, I will tell you that that is the new avenue of approach. And it's been there, we just didn't see it. But like I said, we've already covered all the gates and windows that we know of. But what we don't know is those third and fourth parties that we rely on, even from a communications perspective, even the smaller IoT service provider out there, right? Especially in critical infrastructure. And we know that one of the basis of your National Cybersecurity Commission, or at least for the country, is critical infrastructure, right? Because these are the things that hold the society and support society as a whole. And if you notice, there are those partners and whatnot that we have across. And to an extent, you have some type of vendor management or third-party management, but this is only because of contracts and the like, right? It's never been thought about in terms of, from a cybersecurity perspective, the person or the entity I do business with, I need to check, right? And from the US perspective, there's what we call, or what we have, OFAC, right? We don't do business with certain entities or nation and states. And if you do the research in the background of that third party or fourth party, if there may be a connection, then you need not to do business with that. But we only see things insofar as a third party, right? And we noticed SolarWinds, just like SolarWinds was, it wasn't really SolarWinds, it was the fourth party that was serving SolarWinds, right? And this is what the government is looking into as well. And they started to build, again, that EO. And it really talks about, let me make sure that you're certified as a institution to serve the defense or serve the state or serve the government. And they put in these rigors that actually put into fruition that cyber maturity model we've seen so many times. But this time, they want it certified. And so they built this body, which is basically like your ISO, but on steroids, I always call it. It's ISO 27 on steroids, right? But really, it's really looking at those extra connections down the line, because that is what is going to get us in trouble, right? Third-party risk is a big issue and it must be embraced. We need to monitor it just like we monitor our own organization. And if you notice, there's many services out there. A lot of security services are saying they do that. We need to be cognizant that they're actually doing it. And not just pulling from the internet, the security, on this your security scorecard, and we say, okay, because of the security scorecard, they're okay. But we need to do our due diligence on those support to our third parties as well.
Mr. President,
Yes, Mr. Chair.
you know, it always amazes me to listen to people talking with the mindset of cybersecurity. It's very different. You know, the perspectives are just very comprehensive. Now, a cybersecurity professional is someone who can do critical thinking to the highest level and to the deepest level. Charmaine has been talking about this, what needs to be done. It's really mind-boggling, and it's something that we really need as a country. We'd like to hear from our newly inducted chapter president of PIX Pro Laguna. She herself is also a reserve army officer, a lieutenant colonel as well. John, in your involvement with both the private and the military, what can you say about all this partnership that we need?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon to everybody. It's very interesting. I'm so happy that, this is a topic that we are actually taking up. In my Command and General Staff course paper, that is pretty much the core of my research, how public-private partnership mechanisms can actually leapfrog the capability development of our AFP cyber security group or cyber group. Because as what Colonel Francel mentioned and also affirmed by Ms. Charmaine in her experience in the U.S. military, there is an observation that really governments or military organizations have, generally go slow in terms of capability development. But in the cybersecurity area, you know how fast the development is. And if we are not in step with, say, the bad elements, we will be left behind and we are not able to actually respond properly. And so how the thinking is, the challenge is how as government institutions, especially the military organizations, how can we, step up in terms of our capability development in cybersecurity, particularly, or cyber defense. And there is no other way except public-private partnership. Now, in that aspect, I'm glad that President Ashley brought it up and very aptly and comprehensively responded to by Ms. Charmaine. The challenge now is breaking the mindset of government institutions in terms of the paranoia and the lack of trust. It is valid feeling, sentiment, correct, Ms. Charmaine and Colonel Francel? Obviously, the government will always feel like, oh, I don't know, I don't know if we should partner with this private entity. We were going to open up our how do you call that? Our back door, front door, side door to them. We're exposing ourselves and our witnesses to such entities. But is there any other way? I don't think there is any other way. So my question really, anybody can answer, but of course I address this to Colonel Francel and Ms. Charmaine, whose vast experience is very robust as well. What is the level of percentage of capability development leap? How much of a leap can a government or a public sector entity have if they partner with the public-private sector groups? And I think, Francel actually touched on that very well, comprehensively already earlier, in terms of our COVID response. And Ms. Charmaine, in your experience with the U.S. military, how much of a leap can a government entity, in this case, for example, a military organization, if we partner with the experts in the private sector? And the second aspect of my question is, how much is the level of paranoia or distrust? And how can we overcome that, so that we can proceed and collaborate, cooperate, and really move forward to making sure that we work together in securing our cyber domain? Thank you.
Mr. Chair, before Francel and Charmaine answer, we'd just like to announce, or maybe even beg the indulgence of our audience. This is a very special Friday today, given, of course, the jam-packed session that we have. So instead of our usual 1 hour, we'll be extending a little, maybe 15 or 20 minutes in our session today. So I'm sure you won't mind, given, like I said, the jam-packed nature of our session today. So as to the question of John, yes, go ahead, Francel, and then after that, Charmaine. Thank you.
Ma'am. In terms of my opinion with regards to your question, I think yes, it was encompassed in my presentation that there will really be a big leap. I cannot actually state in percentage because it will vary depending on who we partner with and how much they're willing to cooperate, and also how much they're willing to shell out in the partnership. So I guess the funding is really very difficult in government. So that's really what the private sector has to offer for the government. So you will really go into leaps and bounds if you partner with them. So I think it's gonna be a good solution to partner with them. But in my case, kasi pag tayo cybersecurity field, we're always really working on the notion of paranoia. Because if you are not paranoid, you are not an effective security person. You should always think that something's going to happen, someone's going to attack, something's, if you're not paranoid, you're not an effective security. So that's what I always say. So I tell my people, you should be paranoid because you're thinking na at any point in time, there should be an attack and there should be different types of attacks. So your mind should always be playing that something's going to happen. However, which way, it could be small, it could be big, but you should always be prepared for the possibility of an attack. So I guess really it's a plus for a cybersecurity professional to be paranoid. I don't take it negatively. And always when I present, I'm always the devil's advocate in any presentation. Because when people present, I spoke in a forum of Smart City Summit, everyone was high, like, I'll control the lights, the green, the lights of the traffic lights, the temperature of a building and all that. But when I spoke, everyone was silent because I was like, okay, so you opened yourself into IoT, Internet of Things. So everything is in the air. So it will go back to you. It will have a boomerang effect. If I'm the bad person, I know what time your train is gonna arrive. Alam ko kung saan ka tatambangan, alam ko saan kita hihintayin, alam ko kung saan ko padidilimin ang isang paligid and all that. So I can use it to attack you. So always ako yung panggulo sa isang because these people are always talking about functionality. So they will say, this works, if I press this is gonna work. But these people, salespeople who wants functionality, oftentimes neglect the security aspect. That's why we still have to pay for third party to secure us. So yun din ang hindi pinupundohan ng gobyerno, yung security. Because they're concerned with functionality. Bibilin ko to, gagana to, pero hindi nila naisip na merong security aspect to it. Unless there will be people like us who will be the devil's advocate and say, Sen, na-consider nyo ba na meron kayong security implication with what you did of procuring this software with no security in place? Even those na yung mga light bulbs that are made in China that's very cheap, and you put it there and it's a CCTV, and you install an app and you can watch your home. So people are saying, I can watch my parlor from home. Yung manager ko nakikita ko, or yung yaya ko nakikita ko with my baby. But when they bought it, it was very cheap and there was no security behind it. So yun ang ko, ma'am. So I think for us cybersecurity professionals, paranoia is a good thing. So I will not suggest to remove that level of paranoia, but it will aid us into trying to figure out how much level of security should we put in place. So that's for my point, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
Francel, in fairness to the government, we actually have the same problem in the private sector. It's like this. The chief technology officer is always concerned with new technology and how fast you can go to market, right? The chief information officer is concerned about how quick you can deploy. But like you said, in your case and in our case in cybersecurity, our concern is how to stay alive. Okay, you want to go, you worry about going to market, you worry about deployment, but hey, if you forget about security, how do you stay alive as a business? And that's what they forget. So in fairness to the government, we are in the same boat actually. So Charmaine, can we hear from you?
Yeah, I think we were talking about back to the how do we have this partnership with government and private. It happens when you get attacked. right? Quite simply, we get cyber attacked today. I bet you everybody be in the room and they're gonna say, oh no, I'm gonna share this information with you because we gotta, you know what I mean? It's at that time. You don't want to wait till that time. But I bet you we all come together when we're getting attacked. And the thought process is, and I think this is the good combination between private and public and government. The mentality of we're going to get attacked. How do you live through it? This is natural for the military to think about. The private will always talk about how can I innovate? How can I get this? And if you put it together, it's a mindset. It's actually a perfect combination. And they're always going to fight at each other. But really, it will come together. But wait for an attack to happen. But you don't want to wait for that day. And it's that point where we can create those collaboration environments like what we have today, right? Like-minded people who really think like the house is built, you got doors and windows, but oh, by the way, there's cracks in it because you know what? I bought IoTs that were really cheap. And now the whole world is seeing what I do in my house. And it's out there in some country in China, for example, right? But I hear private sector ask the same question. Hey, is this safe? I'm glad you asked if that is safe. I'm glad you did say that. Because as you're putting in these things in your systems, and they say, oh, it's just CCTV so I can see. Yeah, everybody else can see that too, right? And it makes the bad guy, it's easier for the bad guy to say, well, I know what's going on in that environment. But it will come together. It's just a matter of time. It's like COVID. Came together because of COVID, because we know we have that one enemy, which is the virus, right? We don't want to wait till that time. And I think there is some goodness in creating those partnerships, even if there are pockets. But I know when it comes time, people will come together. We just got to keep those pockets alive, like what we have today. I'm glad we have this your organization that allows us to do this and share this info.
Mr. President.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Let me break the ice very, very quickly.
Okay,
just to greet our viewers. We have viewers from all the way from Mindanao. Sibugay, Mr. President. We have viewers from Sibugay. We have viewers from home court from Batangas, and of course from Metro Manila, and of course Laguna. We have viewers from everywhere actually. So magandang hapon po sa inyong lahat. Pasensya na at masyadong tight yung balitaktakan, no? Yung discussion natin, and very interesting topic with very, very interesting guests we have right now. So magandang hapon po sa inyong lahat, no? We have a viewer from Rizal also. So good afternoon. And yes, we can continue. Masyadong mabigat, no? Ako, bumibili ako ng CCTV na walang security, binibigay ko sa kalaban ko. Nireregalo ko sa kagalit ko, sa kaaway ko. No? Pero pag in-install niya, kaya ko siya i-monitor. I think that's what's happening to our country right now. Right? We are being sold cheap devices. For them, it's not really the money, but it's the information they get out of these devices when it's installed and become part of our network. Incidentally, Idol, Mr. President, I call him Idol. So incidentally, we're talking about we've been since the first time we started talking about cybersecurity and partnership, no. Ngayon, we are still talking about it. But I think now, medyo nabubuo na yung plano natin na if there is no one in the government who can craft a comprehensive national cybersecurity policy. And if we can give our time to assist and help out, I think this is. I already have names in my list to endorse and recommend. It's a highly diversified list of people who can definitely, the output of that national cybersecurity policy will also be very highly diversified and comprehensive end-to-end. Mr. President, we'd like to give a chance to our Vice President Oka. Can we start with you? You have been very silent.
No, I've been listening, Mr. Chair. So first of all, I want to thank Commander Francel and Commander Charmaine. You know, sabi nga natin, women in cybersecurity, but they're actually women.
Wait lang, VPO ka. Kasi binago mo yung rango nila. Baka ma-offend yung mga army natin. Commander is a Navy term unless you are flying something else.
Commander.
Ano yan? Army yan. Diba, Colonel Jan? It's a cardinal sin to call
sige na nga,
army officers by a Navy rank. They will be insulted. Unless you're flying something else.
They're not just women in cybersecurity, but women in military, and women in military in cybersecurity is something else, right? You don't find a lot of them in the industry and potentially globally, no? And it's I'm just really overwhelmed, no, by all the insights coming from them. But it's probably because of the overwhelming problems in cybersecurity, that we have come to realize. Globally, it's not just in the Philippines. Now, I think I'm just happy that the last 1 hour and 15 minutes, I've contributed to the PPP, being part of this session, by listening to our speakers, resource speakers today. But I would like to mention as well that in our own little way, if you look at our backgrounds, Mr. Chair, Mr. Press, now all the technology vendors that PixPro has enjoined in this journey of ours are actually from the private sector. So talking about Gigamon, F5, Fortinet, Palo Alto Networks, of course, and RSA have done their contribution in trying to how do I call it, enrich this partnership in our own little way. And I think we continue to have more. As a matter of fact, 2 more has signed up. And we will be putting them, in the future, right? In the background. So I mean, it's overwhelming, but I think in our own little ways, we as part of the private sector, we can be contributing to how we can better secure the country, by I think, just to talk about some of the initiatives like partnership with some of the like-minded organizations with advocacies in cybersecurity, like in our case, WISAP, right, where we launched CyberSafe Kids, and we're doing quarterly sessions with kids, and parents. So, and I think it's also a way for us and for me to join all other companies in the private sector to do the same thing, in your own little ways.
So, Mr. Chair, just to give credit where credit is due, the fact that we have 5 logos behind us is largely due in part to the efforts of VP Oka and even VP Sheila. We'd like to thank the 2 of them, especially for those efforts and the recent addition of 2. So those 5 logos will now be 7 later on. So, and see, VP Oka makes a very good point. No? That's not necessarily what you would call PPP because we're all in the private sector. But hopefully, PixPro can become the door opener for these 5 and even more of them, more of the likes of them, so that we can bring to bear their expertise and whatever contribution PixPro can give, and we can channel that towards government. And government is rightly the what we would say the major stakeholder in what we all consider to be the goal of elevating the cyber posture of the Philippines. So, Mr. Chair, I wanted to request VP Alex and VP Sheila Sana to we have our usual sort of Miss Universe questions for our guests, and it's not an accident that they are the fifth and the sixth guests from the stronger sex. Okay, and we've always and I feel that we would be remiss in our job if we are not able to ask them their experiences. So VP Sheila, would you like to take over on that point?
Yes,
I'm sorry to brand it Miss Universe questions, but they're not really Miss Universe questions. I'm sorry.
yes, thank you, Mr. Press. Actually, I just want to thank our esteemed guests for joining us tonight. Especially see Miss Charmaine, who have been following, ever since. So thank you again. I don't have any questions right now, but it's more of a request because the topics that we have been discussing tonight I think it deserves more than an hour. I'm very interested to learn about your insights on the National Cybersecurity Plan, the PPP, and a topic that resonates well with me is the securing the supply chain risk. So something that maybe we can invite you again in the future to discuss more specifically on those topics. Maybe one topic per session. Again, thank you. So no questions for tonight.
Okay.
I'll be preparing maybe for the next session. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Chair, what I wanted to ask actually our two guests, and again, my sincere apologies. No, they're not Miss Universe questions, but what I really wanted to know from them is, and I don't want to promote this view, that that the ratio between men and women in the cybersecurity space continue to skew towards more men and less women. Precisely why we have undertaken this effort to encourage more women to join the cybersecurity space. And we know it's been a tough road for them, made tougher, in fact, by the fact that they had to come into cybersecurity from an even more male-dominated field, which is the military. So this would be a very interesting one. Most of our not most, but all of our four previous guests did not have a military background. You have. So it even adds a different, not just different, but a higher level perspective. No, what were the challenges, and how did you in fact break that glass ceiling, if I may call it, when you entered the cybersecurity field as well as the military? So maybe Charmaine and then Francel.
Okay, I guess for the cybersecurity field, it was a natural progression because I was already in the military. I guess I'll go back to having women in the military. So it's still a minority to the day, but it's getting closer, right? And today, even in the U.S. military, you're seeing it. Women are already at West Point. They're in combat arms. These are things that we only wished. But today it's happening because we are as capable as our male counterparts. And growing in that environment, you take it not as a challenge, but as an opportunity, because the opportunity was provided and you can show and prove you're as good as your male counterpart. And while we're in the military, because we were communications, and I think the colonel will tell you the same thing, we're born and raised in the signal field, which is the communications. And if you're in communications, you happen to fall into voice, right? Then it became voice and data. And then eventually now what we call cyber, right? And just like any other profession, it's always going to be a male-dominated environment. But it's not to say that you can't compete in that arena. And it's never something that I thought about where I have to prove myself. It was just go in, get the job done. They like you, you're good. If you're not, well, somebody else will. But just do the job, and in your mind, or I mean, at least it's a mentality that we're here to serve, in whatever capacity. Just so happens it's in the military and in cyber, and still being able to contribute. I don't pull the weapons out, although I pull a keyboard out and do the weaponry there, right, in the cyber side. We are getting there. I see movement. I see a lot. I mean, since even in 2011, from 2011 to now in the private sector, it's grown. Women and we had women in security last year was the beginning of that. So it is getting there, and the glass ceiling has been broken. Seeing more CEOs and CIOs, CISOs out there, and so it's really equal footing. This is my belief, at least.
Ansel?
So in my case, I think it just came naturally because growing up, I was the only girl of 4 siblings. So I've practically been like one of the boys from the onset of childhood years. And then when I went to college, there I was in the engineering in UST. So I have classes where I'm the only female in the group, or dalawa lang kami. So going to PMAs, or it's the same hula baloo, one of the boys kind of thing, and going to the army, it's the same experience altogether. So I think, sir, I consider it as a strength being a female because may mga inherent capabilities yung females. They're very particular to the small details. You're able to look at things that basically the male counterparts neglect to think about. So may mga maliliit na detalye na ikaw yung nag-fill in nun. So I consider it more of a strength being the female in the group. And I don't need to strive to be at their level because basically we're buddies. So something to that effect. As long as I get to be working with them hand in hand, then I get things done. So the same is true when I went to the presidential security groups or as a security officer in an AD camp of 3 presidents. That's when I was enjoined to join the cyber domain. So yung cybersecurity domain, sir. So we would be going to international engagements, and one engagement with China, sir, they blocked all of our radios. So we weren't able to coordinate to one another. So when we came back to the Philippines, we made a vow to set up a good cybersecurity platform for the presidential security group. So it started from there. So doon na, sir, tuloy-tuloy na siya yung passion with that. And I've seen the effects of cybersecurity na there is already war in the cyber domain. Walang nakakahalatang meron. So kailangan nating magsalita na ang mga tao, hey, be cautious because something's really happening in the cyber domain and you're not feeling it. And there are only a few people who are actually concerned that this is actually happening. So I made it my advocacy to teach about cybersecurity, particularly to those non-techie people. So mas gusto ko, sir, yung talagang kwentuhan ng something like this that people not so techie would understand. It's not technical language and all that. But you inculcate to them the value of protecting themselves, because if each person would take it upon themselves to secure themselves in cyberspace, then the more that we are able to further the fence that we're trying to create. So yun, sir, and the answer to the Miss Universe question, sir, is world peace.
Mr. Chair, before I relinquish the floor, I'd just like to share this takeaway, which is basically just affirmed by what I heard from our speakers today. Different is good, and as I would say, different is good because we are different, but we are equal.
Yep.
Okay? So with that, Chair, I relinquish the floor back to you. We have a few more minutes before our extended time this afternoon. This doesn't happen often, but I'm sure you won't mind.
And before we ask for our audience to start having dinner, I'd like to call this guy is I can call him the king of architecture and engineering when it comes to deploying cybersecurity related projects. 2 years, napakaikli lang, without any background in yung totoong cybersecurity. Ito naman yung ngayon, pagka may hiningi ka, mabilis na lang. No? So I'd like to give the floor to our one of our board also, and vice president for membership. Bro, Alexis.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. No? So we have a different kind of session today. No? I was listening for the last maybe 1.5, 15 hours. No? But I didn't get bored. No? So iba yung perspective ng mga guests natin. No? So ang tindi ng mga guests. Actually, natutulala ako, Mr. Chair. No? So napuno ko yung 3 page to notebook ko. I was writing down notes when you were speaking, guys. No? Si Lieutenant Colonel Francel and si Charmaine. No? So ang key takeaway ko rito is that, for me, this is the most insightful session we had so far on Kwentuhang Cybersecurity. And it uplifts my nationalism and patriotism in the country lalo. No? So yung mga binabanggit kanina, my key takeaways on this session is that cyberspace, we are trying to protect it. It's no boundaries, right? As Lieutenant Colonel Francel said, it is borderless. So we need really the expertise, the discipline, and the thinking of both the government, represented by the military, and the private sector, represented by the critical infrastructure like telecoms, like us, Mr. Chair, Mr. President, right? And the mindset and the perspective of military discipline is really important as well. Kasi iba kayo mag-isip, no? So kanina talaga, believe ako kay Charmaine tsaka kay Lieutenant Colonel Francel on how you lay down the things that you are pertaining in terms of cybersecurity. Kasi kami sa private sector, iba namin tinitingnan yun, no? Gaya na sabi ni Mr. Chairman, ako sa architecture engineering, ako magbibuild ng control. Pero I don't know if that control will suffice enough to protect us, no, in the real world scenario. Now ngayon, I'm fortunate enough na gusto ko na makatulong as a private practitioner, number one, because I'm working in a telecom space, which is a critical infrastructure, and number two, as a board of director and member of this advocacy group, PixPro, which will help me, share my expertise and knowledge towards, protecting the Philippine cyberspace. That's for me, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much.
Talagang bigat. Kaya pang ano ka, bro, pang pinali ka. Mabigat ka talaga. But Mr. President, shall we now do the closing remarks? Can you do the honors?
Yep, thank you, Mr. Chair. So, really, thank you, Francel and Charmaine. You did us a very, very big and wonderful favor, and it's our honor to have you, really. No, we don't have, not too often we have the likes of you join us in, a Friday afternoon. So in behalf of our chairman and our board, and even the almost 400 members and counting of PixPro, thank you. And I'm sure our audience who have joined us this afternoon are thankful as well. So sorry again, and I hope we all don't mind the extension, because like I said, this was not a regular session, as you can see the jam-packed nature of it. No? Thank you. We hope that we can invite you again at some point in the future. And to everyone else who have been listening, we ask you again, and we invite you to our next session next Friday. And before that, we should always keep well and keep safe. Coming from a recent COVID survivor, and of course, meron tayong representative dito sa ating Chief Government Agency responding to this pandemic, it's no joke. Okay? In the same manner that cybersecurity is not a joke. So we all should be paranoid about COVID and about cybersecurity as well. So Mr. Chair, I turn back the floor to you.
All right. For my final word, again, thank you very much, Lieutenant Colonel Francel Taborlupa and Ms. Charmaine. I think you're major, no? Charmaine, yes. And our retired U.S. Army Major, Charmaine Valmonte. And welcome to our new chapter, the Laguna chapter and the Davao City chapter. Welcome to the new officers and members. We hope to to have a session with the Laguna members and the Davao City chapters as well. And of course, maraming salamat sa ating mga kakwentuhan. At ngayon po ay Friday na naman. Tapos na naman ang ating session for Kwentuhang cybersecurity session. So it's dinner time, it's drinking time, it's relaxing time, whatever time you call it. Spend with your family and your loved ones, your friends. So from Pix Pro, happy weekend. Pero kung nasa cybersecurity ka, happy lang. Walang weekend.
Bye.
Everyone.
Bye.
everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, sir.
Thank you.
Bye, Jan. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much. Ansel, Ma'am Charmaine, thank you.
Thank you sa lahat.
Forward to more engagement in the future.
Yep, definitely.
Ansel will still be best paper for her.
We should formalize the get together, no, for a national objective.
That's right. I'm very happy with this topic because when I was with the DOJ, I also spearheaded all the PPP mechanisms for that, especially on online, counter online exploitation, both private sector at saka yung intergovernmental. So I'm very, very happy that we're pursuing that route. It's the only way. Diba?
Okay.
Happy
Dinner
weekend.
time, family time.